This is the Texas Land Guys podcast, hosted by brothers Tim Dosh and Tom Dosh. With their partners David Marshall and Trip Rich, they have built DMRE, the leading land brokerage in Texas. With decades of experience brokering deals between landowners and real estate developers, they take you inside the deals that move the market.
All right, well, welcome to the Texas Land Guys podcast. A special episode today for Giving Tuesday here in early December. We have Lane Kipp joining Tim and I here in the Dallas office. Lane, how you doing this morning?
Doing well. Thanks for having me here. It's great.
Thanks for coming in. This is one that Tim and I have been looking forward to, a little bit of a different topic than we talk about a lot of times on our podcast here. But as we're winding down the year and getting into kind of the middle of the holidays, and there's all these different days like Black Friday and of course Thanksgiving before that. And then you've got Cyber Monday. And then there's this day, Giving Tuesday, that all of us are probably already deep in emails from different organizations we know about that are requesting donations. And so we thought it'd be appropriate to have you on the podcast. We've become good friends the last couple of years, and you run an organization called All Access, which we want you to tell our audience about. And you really, I think your goal is to help people give better and give to very high impact, efficient projects where they know that their dollars are being wisely spent. Same way that we think about it just in business, that things are being run appropriately, that we're looking at how every dollar is being spent, but also just that there's going to be impact. So it should be a really fun conversation today, and appreciate you being willing to join us and talk about it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's an exciting topic that everybody deals with. So I'm excited to dive into it.
I was thinking we could maybe talk about how we all met. And Tim, you were just saying, I don't think you and Lane have gotten to meet in person yet,
No.
but you probably feel like you know him because you've talked to him quite a bit.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say too, Tom, just something we've talked a lot about on the podcast. We talk a lot about our business and about success in our business and what it takes to be successful. But we've also talked about that, success is very empty if it's all about you and all about, making money and it's all for you. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of times we each of us can struggle with that. And there's so much blessing and giving and helping other people. And there's amazing organizations working all around the world, working in Houston, working in Dallas, across the United States, working in every part of the world. And there's tremendous needs. And I know we've gotten to see that traveling and working with different groups and giving to different groups. And so that's such an important part of our story, and our passion is not just being successful, but there needs to be a greater purpose for that, beyond just, ourselves and our families and our company. And that's why I'm excited about this conversation with Lane, because I think he's really going to help give us some practical tips about how we can each kind of lean into that, and grow in that.
Yeah, maybe we could start with how we first met. So a background that Tim and I have talked a little bit about on the podcast is our nonprofit, 100 Times Harvest, that we started with David Marshall back in 2018, about a year after we started our company. And the three of us really, to Tim's point, we had a lot of success in business. We wanted to give back. We wanted to have more formal generosity as a company and also just open that up to our network. And so we gotten to know some just really neat people across the world, some other really like-minded people. One guy in particular named Steve Caliper, who has an organization that comes alongside nonprofits, helps them raise money, helps them with their marketing, helps them with capital campaigns, kind of, with their branding, all of that. And Steve texted me, and he does that a lot. He's connected me with different ministries. And so it was one of these texts, though, that was kind of unique. And I can't remember exactly how it was phrased, but it was like, Lane's a really cool guy or something, and then something about me. And then it was like, and you guys need to meet each other because you're both, in your 30s, younger guys, and you're both really passionate about building the kingdom and generosity and trying to make an impact. And so we went and had lunch at Gloria's, and I was just blown away with your story, and then just hearing about how much you had dedicated your life to this whole concept of generosity, but from the standpoint of really being a guide and an advisor to people like Tim and I, to business professionals, and even just to organizations on how they can do a better job, and nonprofits, how they can do a better job of asking for money and then reporting back and that whole process. And so we have to thank Steve for that connection. And it's been a lot of fun to get to know you. So I don't know if you had any expectations going into that lunch on where this relationship's gone, but it's been pretty neat to see our two organizations partner up.
Yeah, it has. And what was so fun about that lunch was how similar the things we're working on really are. And that was just such an encouraging time of seeing other guys because it's been a pretty lonely road doing this because it's somewhat new in the space. And so seeing another group who's doing it and doing it so well, it was just really encouraging. And it's been so fun to partner with you guys.
You have a lot on your plate. I remember a LinkedIn post when I first met you. I think you had just turned 30, talking about like you already had, I think, 2 kids or had a second kid on the way. You had gone to A&M, like Tim and I, so another Aggie, and you had already had a really interesting kind of background and career, and already lived internationally and already come back. And so there's a lot there. But could you kind of give us a little bit of your background, and maybe then we'll talk more about what All Access is. But I think starting with your background, even back to A&M and where you thought your career was going to go, would be great for our audience to hear.
Yeah, so I'm from Southeast Texas, went to Texas A&M, studied ocean engineering there, which is also known as naval architecture. So a lot of people go into offshore oil and gas. I went into the private boat and yacht sector. And so my wife and I met at A&M, dated all through college, got married in College Station right after we graduated, moved to Orlando. And I started working for a great company called Regal Boats. So they make boats from 20 feet to 53 feet. And I was their chief naval architect at a really young age, too young, really. And it was great, man. It was really the best job. It was incredible. It was a dream job. Had it at 22 right out of college, and great company, faith driven company, family owned company, and I was miserable. I don't know what it made no sense really to have the dream job. I mean, I was designing these prototype yachts. We had to take the yachts, we had to test them, and so it's like, okay, I guess I'll be the guy that tests this yacht, taking it to the Bahamas over the weekend, and yet at the same time, my soul was just empty. Like, man, what am I doing with my life? What impact am I making in the world? I go to these international boat shows in Fort Lauderdale and Miami, and there'd be billions and billions of dollars of boats in the marina. And I love boats and I love that industry, but I just thought, man, what impact in the world could these dollars, have spent somewhere else? If given well, what impact could that make? And at the same time, I was doing well financially, trying to give well, and was pretty frustrated with not having any tools to help me do that well. And so you end up kind of giving blindly. Here I am, young in my career, trying to invest well, learning about investing and all of that, trying to give well. And there's thousands of tools out there to help me invest well, virtually zero to help me give well.
Hmm.
And we started praying, my wife and I, like, okay, Lord, if there's something else out there for us, we're in. And 2 weeks later, we get a phone call from our friends, an organization we were supporting in Haiti, saying, hey, what do you guys think about moving down here? My wife's in the medical field. She's a physician assistant. She was just wrapping up PA school. And we prayed about it. But at the time, no house, no kids. And so we pretty quickly made the decision, yeah, we're going to do this. I mean, if we don't do it now, when are we ever? So we did. So in 2018, we moved to Haiti to work with an organization down there. We loved it, loved Haiti. But my perspective on the nonprofit world was gradually getting flipped upside down. Personally, I was not very effective. I was not doing what's in the best interest of those in need. And about 6 months in, Haiti got really, really violent. And on an hour notice, we were forced to evacuate Haiti. And we thought, okay, cool, we'll come back for the States for a week. We'll eat well and then go back down. And that quickly turned into a month to 2 months to 3 months. Because what we didn't know was that the organization we're with was struggling financially. And eventually they decided not to send people back down. And so we got to see the not so pretty side of the nonprofit sector and what can happen. And it really wrecked my world. And so we decided, you know what, let's stay put here in Dallas. We evacuated Dallas. Let's get our feet back under us financially. I went back into engineering consulting, MEP work for architects. And then I had also started at Dallas Theological, just knowing not only do I need a lot more training if I'm going to continue in this field, I can't imagine going back to designing yachts after what I saw in Haiti. But I'm also just generally curious about theology. And so I had the opportunity to study there. And it was in grad school at DTS where I started wrestling with the idea of creating the tool that I needed back when I was giving well as a naval architect. And that's kind of where All Access was born.
Wow. So a couple of questions on that, just as you were talking. I'd be interested to just go a little deeper into that being so young at the time, like getting married right out of school. And then it sounded like probably like in your early 20s, you're a naval architect, but then already to be that young, but then to be thinking about things like, what am I doing with my life?
Right.
And so those type of questions. And then also just like, what's the impact of my giving? And then making such a significant change and then coming back and then going to Dallas Theological Seminary. What I'm hearing there is there's just a lot of maturity, long-term thinking, and being willing to like back up and ask bigger questions. I'm comparing that to, most people that I know that are, younger coming out of school. It's like you're just getting on a track and you're just running that track and you're not really asking a lot of questions. And if you get a good job, especially if you get the dream job, you're probably just going to stick with it and do it. So what would you attribute some of that to? Just like the ability to ask those bigger questions, to back up, to think, and to reflect on that in a different way than maybe what other people around you would be doing.
I don't know, Tom. I mean, it probably goes back to just my own faith story. I mean, I grew up in the church, Tim, but I remember when I was about 11 or 12. I don't remember the sermon or we were talking about, but I remember thinking, we don't do that. So what are we doing here? What is this real? Is this legit or not? Or what are we doing here? And so I just started. I guess I was a pretty bored junior high kid, and I just started reading the Bible for myself. And over the course of about a year and a half, starting with Matthew through the New Testament and going back in the Old Testament, read the Bible for myself, fell in love with Jesus and the mission he was on, and was already seeing a disconnect between the American Christian life and this mission in the Bible of being redeemed and being a part of redeeming the world. But I didn't know what to do with that. As a young, obviously junior high kid, going into high school, read Radical by David Platt, who really reassured that perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But my thought was, hey, I'll go, make a lot of money and give well towards that, and kind of still chasing the American dream, I think, a little bit. And it was when I did that, and my soul was still empty. That is when I was really thinking, okay, God, what am I doing here? What do you have for me? And so I just kind of put it out on the table of, I'll follow wherever you lead me, God. And that's been some pretty crazy places so far. So it was a dangerous prayer at the time, but it's been truly God who has led all this. And that's, I think, just even a larger testament to what we're doing, what we're working on, is it wasn't really my grand idea. It was just being okay with wherever God would lead me, even if that meant leaving my dream job, which still to this day has been really hard. I'm
Mm-hmm.
always tempted to go back. Every time they put out a new boat, I'm like, man, I could have driven that to the Bahamas. But yeah, so I wish I knew in greater detail, but it's really just been a journey of a step of faith and taking each step. So,
Well, it sounds like you wanted something real. You wanted not, I think a lot of times we can kind of go through the motions and it's like, oh, we're supposed to give, so we're going to give, or we're supposed to go help people, so we're going to go do that. But we're really, maybe our heart isn't fully in it and we're not fully submitting that to God and surrendering to Him. And so we're just kind of going through the motions. And so it doesn't really impact us. But what you were doing is saying, I want this to be real. I want this to be part of my relationship with God. I want it to have real impact. And to do that, it's a faith walk with Him, and it's following Him. And then He's going to lead you through things that might be difficult, but that are very real and very impactful. And that's a beautiful story because at a very young age, you chose to leave your dream job and go to Haiti, which I don't know if that's when that prayer happened, or when that maybe there was probably multiple prayers over different times that happened, but that shows just a real desire to say, God, I surrender. I want you. I don't want this job or this like you said, the American dream or whatever it is. I want you. And so wherever you want to put me, I'm willing to go, um, and walk with you there.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, you're right, Tim. I appreciate you saying that. And a lot of it was I felt like something was missing in that time. And looking back now, which we'll get into All Access and the tool we built, but I think if I would have had a tool, like if All Access would have existed while I was a naval architect, I think I could have honestly stayed and used this tool
Mhm.
and had an even more impactful life than what God's led me through today. And so that is kind of again, a testament to the tool and what we're doing is now like if you're a accountant at EY in Dallas and you're struggling, you're having that same struggle. Um, my prayer would be maybe this tool could help you fulfill that by being a part of what God's doing around the world and possibly and truly make more impact than if you left that job at EY and tried to be a missionary, which is a very, very hard task. And so that's my hope is to I really get excited about other young professionals who are also wrestling with that and being able to meet them where they are and help them make an incredible impact from where they are. That's what really gets me fired up.
That's great. It's neat because every ministry that Tim and I have worked with, there's always a founder that's passionate about like the cause. And you're passionate about the cause because you were that person. Like you were your target audience and there wasn't a solution. And so now you're just trying to provide that solution to them. Let's get into a little bit of what All Access is. I've always felt like the branding you came up with was so perfect because it works both ways. It works for the donor and then it also works for the recipient that you're targeting and both of them having all access. So do you want to kind of walk through what it is? And I think you've done a good job of articulating the need for now what it is. And then now kind of what the tool is actually developed to be as well.
Yeah. So All Access, in a nutshell, All Access is a giving fund. We help people find and fund the most impactful projects in the darkest places in the world. So in a way, we're kind of brokering deals. We're helping donors find and fund the most impactful projects in the most unreached and impoverished places. And we named it All Access because we want all people to have access to the gospel and the basic means of physical survival and well-being. So access to the gospel and freedom from extreme poverty. It's a great commission, great commandment to make disciples of all nations and to love our neighbors around the world the best way we can. And what's crazy is that even though American donors alone already give over $500 billion a year to charity, it's $500 billion, that half of the world, about 4 billion people, still live in extreme spiritual or physical poverty, meaning they don't have access to the good news of the gospel because they don't have practical access to a local believer or even a Bible or a local church or someone to disciple them and share the truth of Jesus with them, or just the basic means of physical survival and well being, like adequate nutrition, safe water to drink, actually a quality school and education or the ability to afford that education, local hospitals or just jobs. And so, what All Access is doing with this tool we built is it's using analytics to accelerate the Great Commission and Commandment by helping donors at any giving level. So, young professionals like I was to seasoned philanthropists and foundations, helping us find and fund the most impactful projects in the most unreached and impoverished places. So, just like modern investing tools, these analytics help us evaluate organizations and consult experts to develop a portfolio of the most impactful giving opportunities that we can find. And the way the fund works is thanks to our sponsors like 100 Times Harvest and McClellan Foundation, 100% of what people give to the fund goes directly to the projects in our portfolio. So we have a completely separate account that covers our operational expenses so that everything that people give to the fund or to a specific project in the portfolio goes directly to the field. And then we actively monitor those projects and report everything back to our members every 90 days, including real-time progress updates, pictures, stories, and financials, including where every dollar went and every itemized operational expense that it took us to do that for them. So the hope is that we do provide a solution for those who want to give well, that they can do that and know confidently of where it's going and the impact it's making. But in doing all of that, if enough of us use this tool to really accelerate the Great Commission, Great Commandments, it just help a lot more people in need and hopefully solve some of the world's greatest problems out there, which we have calculations, predictions on, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, I was going to say, Lane, one thing that's always really, I think, been encouraging about All Access is you have such a good balance between the importance of the gospel and making sure we're supporting ministries that are getting the gospel out, but then also the importance of the humanitarian side, helping people who are in need, helping feed people, which I think is so biblical. I mean, Jesus said, to help the poor, to give to the poor, that they're always going to be with us, that there's something, he has a heart for them. And I think so often, you know, groups are kind of either on one side or the other. Maybe you could say people are either people are very humanitarian and not very gospel focused, or they're so gospel focused it's almost like it doesn't matter about the humanitarian. We just need to share the gospel. And I think that the true biblical, is both sides. The gospel, but also meeting people's physical needs and loving them. It's that kind of a compassionate ministry that I think God calls us to. So I've loved how you've had that dual focus that I think is really healthy.
Well, that's where starting All Access in grad school really helps. In theological grad school, I was wrestling with that as well, Tim. Of honestly, marketing wise, it would have been easier to stick to one or the other, but biblically, we just couldn't do that because he cares about both.
Yeah.
And if we're sharing the gospel while there are kids dying from a preventable disease, is that the most loving? It kind of goes back to my really technical theological training of what would Jesus do?
Yeah.
Mindset. And he obviously did care for those. And at the same time, if we're teaching them how to, succeed business wise by grafting avocado trees together to have a greater, fruit outcome, and yet not sharing the gospel with them, that's an incredible disservice to them.
Yeah.
And so that's why it was important to us to do both. The tricky part is when you start, in our philosophy, to start in the most unreached and impoverished places and work backwards from there, is the data takes you two different places. So for spiritual poverty, it's mostly Middle East, South Asia, North Africa. And then for physical poverty, it's by and large Sub-Saharan Africa. And so that's why our portfolio looks the way it does, is because of that.
Yeah, which, like you said, it's a much harder way to approach the ministry, like operationally and messaging wise. But Tim and I have talked a lot about what you just said, Tim, that we've supported a lot of organizations through Under Times Harvest, a lot of great organizations. But we've also come back many times to, we always have been very focused on organizations that are sharing the gospel, because it is the good news. Like, that's what it means. It's the good news. That's what we want to be sharing. But then we'll also be asking, like, what are we doing in these areas from a humanitarian standpoint? Because Tim and I have both traveled in areas throughout India and the Middle East and Africa, and just we've seen extreme poverty, and these areas have been like that for a long time.
Yeah.
And you were mentioning earlier the amount of money, $500 billion given every year. And I know you've talked to me about some of the stats on how we could be giving so much more effectively, and how there's just, which we know this, but there's so much waste. And so maybe getting into that a little bit, because there's areas of the world where there's a lot of duplication of efforts and there's a lot of waste on both the spiritual and the physical side. Like, there's areas where the number of people that have, accepted the gospel, it would, like, that whole continent was now saved like 6 times. And you're like, well, what are we doing there? How are we tracking these numbers? Is this really working? Because you go there and you're like, that's not what I'm experiencing when I go there. But then the same from a humanitarian standpoint, it's like, and Tim and I saw this in Africa, you get lots of money or lots of like food sent by countries to these really difficult places of the world, and then there's a lot of corruption, never gets to the people. People are starving, and so this is kind of that environment that we're in, that you're trying to work in. So maybe speak to that a little bit, because that's a constant challenge. It's just that inefficiency.
Yeah, well, it makes sense, right? If there's nobody there to kind of help on behalf of those in need to make sure they get the best help they want, and there's nobody there to help donors. I mean, it's kind of like an unregulated space if you think about it. Sure, there's IRS stuff. You go to, you get in trouble if you do that incorrectly, but the average donor just isn't honestly equipped to look at that financial information and really discern it and understand what's going on. So we need, just like there's brokers in this space and real estate, and there's financial advisors, there's, even in VC and private equity, there are people out there who are finding these deals. We desperately need somebody in the giving space because it literally the future of the world depends on it. A lot of lives depend on it. And there's virtually nobody out there doing it. And not only that, but what could happen? I mean, we just wrapped up last week our annual evaluation process. So every year we reevaluate to figure out who should be in our portfolio, basically re-up our deal flow. And next week, we're proposing an updated portfolio to our board of 12 verified high impact projects, $86 million of giving opportunity, where for about $73 per person could help about 2 million people out of extreme spiritual or physical poverty. So not just help 2 million people, but we predict, will go from deprived to not deprived in a technical poverty metric because of this program, which is a big deal. And the reason I bring that up, Tom, is because when I extrapolated it out to, okay, what would it cost using the methods that the organizations in our portfolio are using? What would it take to actually technically end extreme spiritual and physical poverty? Just getting people up from the basic, most fundamental levels of survival, really, up to where they can participate in the marketplace. It would cost about $133 billion to do that, which, if going back to that $500 billion, that's about 27% of what Americans alone are already giving to charity. It's about 53% of what's already in American donor advised funds right now. So the long story short is it's possible, but not the way we're currently giving, because there just really, frankly, isn't any help in that space. So it makes sense, honestly, not only the corruption, the inefficiency, ineffectiveness, just because, frankly, it wasn't possible until about 5-10 years ago with the technology that's out there. But there just wasn't anybody there to help donors navigate the space. So it makes sense, really, that it's kind of the Wild West of the financial space, but it's 2% of our GDP. That's the Wild West, and kind of the future of not only a lot of people's lives, but the world. So it's crazy, Tom.
Yeah.
I was blown away that there really wasn't something like this out there. I'd had no intentions of starting something. It's the last thing I really wanted to do. But when I did the math of what it would take and what was possible, it was, I thought it was worth it to put a tool out there like this and see what happens.
How many nonprofits are there? I know you've thrown that number up roughly, because there's probably tons started every day, but
There are a ton started every day. It's about 1.8 million registered in the United States. So globally, I think probably closer to 3 million.
that's incredible. So you think about when you made the comment unregulated, and there is some regulation, but to your point, it's anybody can go ask anybody for money for anything. They can present like, this is what we're doing. Tim and I have experienced that where, people ask for money and then you give money and it doesn't go to what you thought you gave it towards. And that's why we've started our nonprofit and try to be much more hands-on with what we're giving to. But that's incredible what you're talking about, because you have 1.8 million, 3 million globally, but then the amount of dollars you're talking about, significant dollars that are there. And then you have really wealthy, philanthropic funds that are giving to these organizations. And so it's unfortunate that there's so much being given. And the biggest problem is not that there's not enough money being given, which I think a lot of times that's the main reason people give. It's more of like a guilt, like I need to give more, because I'm not giving, or I'm either not giving, or I'm not giving enough. We do need to be giving, but it's more important before we're just thinking about how much we're giving to be thinking about what we're giving to and if it's being effective. Because, with these numbers, the truth is enough's being given to solve a lot of these problems. But then there's the human element that's getting in the way, that's keeping these problems from being solved.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
Yeah, I was going to say what you see so often when you get into it, because I think, going back 10 or 15 years, we were kind of on the fringes of it and we didn't really know. But as you start to meet all these different leaders of organizations and different organizations, people are coming to you for money, you start to see that there's, on one side, incredible people doing incredible work that's very valuable. And then there's another side where there's like people who are really good at sales and people that they're raising tons of money and they know how to manipulate people. And maybe they are doing some good and there's some good things happening, but they're also not being completely honest about what's actually happening out in the field. And I mean, it can be kind of discouraging or kind of shake you up a little bit because we've, like Tom said, we've had some pretty bad experiences with people we trusted, and we started as we got to know them and got to see what was going on. It wasn't quite what we thought. And so it's I think that it just shows us there's such a big need to be discerning and to be wise and be prayerful and to work with someone like you that's really taking time to do the research and giving people accountability or giving organizations accountability that they follow through with what they say they're going to do.
Yeah, I want to get in the weeds for just a second, just because as you're talking, you're talking about poverty levels. People could be listening, thinking like, "What? I don't really understand what Lane's talking about," or like, "How can he say that?" And what's the metrics? And one thing I know about you from getting to know you is you're very well read, very well connected. Probably part of it's your engineering background. You really study these things and analyze them. Do you want to kind of walk us through like this is real data? And when you're talking about a certain dollar amount that moves the needle to a certain degree, you're actually like looking at data. This is not, you're not just like making it up and it's subjective and you're hypothetically thinking through this. Do you want to kind of just share that process? Because that was really eye opening to me that this is available data that can be tracked, that you're constantly studying and looking at.
Right. Yeah. It goes back to the research in grad school when I was researching, okay, what is poverty? What do we mean by that? How do we measure it? And what would it take to actually end it? And so when the UN reports that 1.1 billion people live in extreme poverty, what they're referencing is a database that the University of Oxford has developed, the Oxford Poverty and Human Development Initiative, where it's literally a spreadsheet. And so for every developing country, every subnational region of every developing country, we know what percent of people lack access to basic sanitation, water, education, in detail. I mean, even child mortality, assets, housing, things like that. And it's very well defined. So when the UN says poverty, they're really referring to the multidimensional poverty index that has 10 indicators. So child mortality, education, the things I just listed. And it's a spreadsheet. So anybody can go to OPHI, their website, and download the same spreadsheet we're looking at. So when we say ending extreme poverty, it's literally getting all these Excel cells down to zero. And what that allows us to do is actually track whether it's being done, how well are we doing at this, but also evaluate organizations because it gives us a metric to base off. Who can best reduce these numbers? So physical poverty space, it's really well defined. For spiritual poverty, we're looking at unreached people groups and some actually new stuff that's coming out where we're mapping where are churches, where are they not, where are believers, where are they not, as globalization's rapidly happening. So the people group term is kind of quickly, it needs updating. So that's what we're looking at there is where they're believers, where they're not, and then starting in the most unreached places and working backwards from there. But I can get really technical with it, but the good news is we have this data. And that's why I say 5-10 years ago, this wasn't possible because we just frankly didn't have this information. And that's what makes this all possible is that data.
Yeah, I mean, I think where my mind was going with this is just you talked about technology changing and just how much better we're getting as nonprofits at sharing the gospel. There's so many more ways to do that now. The translation of the scripture into heart languages, the way that the internet is being used and apps being used. Tom and I've been involved with ministries where they're able to see people like in Muslim countries they're very close to the gospel, but they're able to see what they're reading on these different Bible apps and stuff and getting, the presentation of the gospel into those countries. Then, and the same thing on the humanitarian side, we've done such a bad job of that the last 100 years, giving billions of dollars and not moving the needle. But I think there's also a lot of new thinking on, when helping hurts and, how to really make things sustainable, how to really help people, empower people versus make them dependent. And so I think that's exciting at the same time that you're bringing together these metrics to how do we measure, the impact. I think there's actually a lot better impact that can be made than maybe it was in the past because of how much better some of these nonprofits are getting in the space.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, Tim. And going back to your earlier point, what's crazy is the nonprofit space, the ministry space, just what makes our job difficult is they're not used to. They've never really had to do this before, where they're getting funding based off their impact and not just selling an idea. And so, what makes it harder is, for these calculations that we're using to be useful, the input information has to be accurate. And so we have to work really hard with all these organizations to make sure that's accurate. But what makes it difficult is they just haven't had to have that information and for it to be accurate to get funding. And so that's and honestly, moving forward, if they can continue, which I'm very hopeful with millennial and Gen Z, who are very skeptical of nonprofits, but they're very focused on justice. They want to make an impact with their life, and everybody does, but especially that generation is nonprofits will have to think differently to survive. They cannot just keep selling the idea because it's just not going to work anymore. And so I strongly encourage nonprofits to start. Um, and it really starts with the perspective of donors. We have to see nonprofits as vendors. That's what I really recommend, is starting with that perspective. They're a means to an end, which is good because the good organizations who are making an impact, they should be getting the funding. And so it's actually not only in the poor's best interest to see nonprofits as vendors, but it's in the nonprofit's best interest. It means they can spend less money on fundraising and marketing and trying to sell this idea and just be really good at what they do. And we can just connect the dots with the donors, broker that deal to, hey, just keep being really good at what you do, and we'll help fund it and see the impact.
When you mentioned millennials just now, I had a conversation with a ministry the other day, and he was just sharing, and this is happening with a lot of ministries. It's like their donor base is aging.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're trying to figure out, and a lot of it is you have like the founders stepping away or retiring. And so then, the donor base can be tied to that founder a lot of times, but they're aging out. And so he was sharing, he's like, we're having a lot of just challenges with millennial giving. Is that something that you're seeing too? Or that's been kind of a big target of yours, is getting millennials excited and giving? So maybe it's like a global problem, but maybe there's a solution to that.
Yeah, a lot of nonprofits are very fearful right now because you're absolutely right. What that organization was sharing with you, every organization is talking about and really fearful about. But it's what's really interesting is most of our members of our fund, not dollar amounts, but as far as head count, are millennial or Gen Z.
Wow.
And we didn't intend for that. It's just an accidental byproduct.
Yeah.
But what we found is that they are very skeptical,
Mm-hmm.
and rightfully so, the nonprofit sector and churches, to be honest. But they, I think, even more than other generations, they're very justice oriented. They want to make an impact. And I think it's because of globalization. They can see what's happening in Gaza right now, what's happening all around the world, and they want to be a part of it, but they don't know what to do with that. And so All Access accidentally fit that niche need where we show everything, every dollar that's spent, where it goes. We show what's really happening, even if it's not great, what's happening in the field. And so we kind of accidentally meet that need. And so I just encourage more nonprofits to survive and thrive in the space. You got to be more impactful. You got to be more transparent.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think even everything you're talking about related to objectivity and data, that's going to register with this generation we're talking about versus, and even earlier when you're talking about vending, kind of being vendors, the traditional appeal, Tim spoke to it, and a lot of ministries are not like this, but it's pretty emotional for money, and it can be kind of manipulative and really make the donor feel bad, if they're not giving to it. And it really kind of takes the focus off of what you're talking about, which is, what are we doing? What's the impact? How are we accomplishing that? I remember maybe 10 years ago, I had a ministry tell me, they're like, we're really going to start focusing on the impact of, what we're doing. And it was interesting to me because I was like, wow, that's crazy that hasn't been the case. But it aligns with what you're saying, that that's not really the way ministries have been operating. Because he's like, we're moving from the pie chart that shows, how much of our overhead goes to, or how much of the dollars coming in go to overhead and like admin and then go to the field, to like, what's the breakdown of impact?
Yeah.
And so that's obviously a shift that's been going on, but that's probably a difficult shift for a lot of these ministries that have been around for a long time, especially if it's requiring more, data keeping. And that's what I was going to ask. the other side of what you're looking at, in addition to these different kind of like big picture where are the issues, is who's doing a good job of serving them. So where do you find that information, and then how do you then go evaluate the ministries? Because it's like you define the problem, but it's a problem for a reason. So how do you go find the partners to solve it?
Yeah, well, that's where our analytics really come in, and it's kind of like Moneyball. If people have read that book or seen the movie, it's really that. I mean, we've just boiled it down to a science because we have data on extreme spiritual and physical poverty. We basically created a calculation that helps us taking all the marketing bias and relationships out of it. Who can best reduce these levels, these poverty levels, in the most cost effective and sustainable way? And so we look at a lot of numbers, but it really comes down to five main ones. We look at effect. We just call it effect, which basically means how many people do we expect this program? How many people do we expect it to pull out of extreme poverty, multiplied times the weight of that deprivation? So some poverty indicators are more weighted than others. So like child mortality is really up there, whereas housing and assets has a lower weight.
Mm-hmm.
And so what that allows us to do is summate, all these different cause areas down into one number. How many people will it pull out of that poverty indicator? Then the second one is program efficiency. What does it cost to do that? Have that program effect to pull those people out of extreme poverty. The third is location. Some areas are more deprived than others. So if a really effective and efficient program is working in South Lake, Texas, one of the most wealthiest regions in the world versus South Sudan, the poorest country of the world,
Mm-hmm.
obviously that it gives more weight to that program in South Sudan, which means all of our programs in our portfolio are all international. We get that a lot. People ask, hey, do you do anything domestic? And the answer is right now, no. And hopefully it's always a no, because that means we're doing okay here.
Yeah.
And if you've traveled at all, and I encourage people who are listening to travel, you understand that the needs internationally are significantly worse. There are needs here, but it's significantly worse internationally. Even internationally, it's worse in some places than others.
Mm-hmm.
So that third number we look at helps us capture that. And then the fourth number is our Moneyball quotient, essentially, where we take those first three numbers and we multiply it all down into one number that helps us see relatively with these three different numbers which ones are working, have the most impact in the most impoverished places most efficiently. And then the fifth one is more of a qualitative metric where we ask 20 questions and we rank them, the answers 0 to 3. And basically what it's helping us do is measure how confident are we in the organization's ability to make that impact based off how long they've been there, their leadership, how they collect data, is it reliable, things like that. So even the geopolitical status of the location. So all of that goes into us creating this database where we can basically take the top ones and put them in our portfolio and fund them.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you're doing this with a very large number of organizations that you're comparing and looking at. And so this is a pretty extensive process and just probably pretty time intensive to go through that. And you're doing it every year, you said. So
Right.
you're just like a portfolio manager would be doing. You're not just like doing it once and then letting it sit there for 10 years. Like every year you're reanalyzing, looking at it. I know you also will travel to the field and meet with the organizations in the field. And so it's just an incredible amount of work that's going on. Can you share any stories just from since starting All Access, some of the exciting projects you've gotten to be a part of with some of these different organizations, or things you've even seen just on your travels?
Oh man, there's no shortage of stories. A few that come to mind. I met a guy named, he has several names, but the name we know him by is Mufti. And the reason he has multiple names is he's former Al-Qaeda. And so when, the movie, when they went and got Bin Laden, I forgot what that movie's called, but he was down the street when that was
Wow.
going on. He saw Jesus in a dream and didn't know what to do about it. And so he actually found a believer. Instead of killing him, he started trying to interpret this dream, and he came to faith. And an organization we work with in the Middle East in our portfolio, Mufti's a part of it, of making literally thousands of disciples in the Middle East through this disciple making movement method. And it's incredible. I got to sit down with Mufti in the Middle East last year and hear his story and obviously evaluate what he's doing, and he's on top of it. It's incredible. Very faithful guy. And then there's, oh man, in like the Sahel in northern Africa, it's a lot of these women in these majority Muslim countries. There's a woman named Habessa who lives in Chad. It's one of the poorest countries in the world, and she had to drop out of school at the age of 12 to fetch water for her new husband. She was forced to marry, and she was denied the education that she really wanted. And not only fetch water, but I mean, walk for miles each day fetching dirty water that was getting her family sick and it's killing. It's like the number one killer of kids in Africa right now is waterborne disease and malnutrition, things like that. So now with our work with Never Thirst, that's in our portfolio, her community has local access to not only safe drinking water, but also the gospel through their work with the local church there. So, man, there's so many stories, and it's incredible what God's doing. And there's also a lot of just dark stories as well of, nonprofits reporting things they're not doing. But I try to highlight the organizations are doing really, really good work. And I got to meet some former devout Hindus in India who are now making disciples and planting churches, not only in India, but Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan. And but it always starts with one person's life being redeemed and how God's using them in incredible ways. It's awesome.
That's really cool. Well, you take it from, we've been talking a lot about just like metrics and numbers and all of that for a reason, but then to the stories, like these are real people, and when you talk about billions of people,
Yeah.
you can't really like wrap your mind around that. But then when you talk about just individual stories of Mufti, and you start thinking about them as like each of those billions that you're talking about, there's a person there and somebody that, like child mortality, somebody that's dying at a really young age because they don't have clean drinking water, something that, like you said, we've known how to solve that for a long time, but we haven't. And so it's pretty exciting. And I'm sure it's exciting and frustrating because it's exciting for you because you can partner with Never Thirst for a pretty limited amount of capital. You can go provide safe drinking water, which saves lives. But then it's also frustrating because it's like you want to do that as fast as you can. And the dollar per life is probably not very much, but it's just trying to get people to realize, the opportunity to be a part of that. So anyways, it's kind of amazing to like really think about. And when you're talking about poverty here versus poverty overseas, you're right. I mean, we have poverty here, but having traveled in some of these different continents, it's amazing the level of poverty that, I don't, if you haven't traveled, I think, or if you travel, but you just never go to that part of town, because they just always kind of put that in a different part of town. And then they've got like the resort in the other part of town. You just miss out on like the reality of what most of the people are going through in a lot of these places, just like you said, from a percentage standpoint. So,
Yeah, it is wild, and I just encourage people to go see it. I've never met anybody who has seen it and it hasn't changed their life, or they haven't understood the need internationally. And in a globalized world where we are traveling all the time, they are our neighbor. Now we can't unsee it, what's happening, and there are ways to be a part of it. And so I think that, especially if you're a believer, it should be a part of your giving portfolios, being a part of what God's doing internationally. And it's the opportunity we have, unlike any generation before, to be a part of it in ways because of analytics and tools like this, to really not only be a part of it, but actually possibly see the day where all people have access to the gospel and freedom from extreme poverty. And that's my bar is there, because it's doable with what we're already giving with charity to charity every year. So why not? Why not? Again, these are people's kids with names and futures, and they with wants, and it's there. So let's be a part of it. And I don't want to be the person who stands before God at the end of my life and say, "Well, I chose not to be a part of it. I chose a different way." I want to say, man, I did everything I could to be a part of it from right where I was, and when we think about sacrifice as a disciple of Jesus, most people think about it means going to the field and living, and that is a
Mhm.
sacrifice. Having done it, it's a huge sacrifice. I lost 20 pounds, and I didn't have 20 pounds to lose when I lived in Haiti. But what we also don't think about is that accountant at EY who maybe the sacrifice is staying in that cubicle and doing a really, really good job and giving well. And we try to make that easier, more impactful, but also more rewarding. And so not just giving blindly and hoping it,
Mhm.
but connecting you with it. It's funny, the guy I'm talking about is a guy named Nicholas. I actually took him to India with me to see it in person. He's an accountant at EY. An awesome guy, member of the fund, very generous young professional. And whereas he could have quit his job, left EY, and gone to the field, and God
Mhm.
still uses that. But now anybody can be a part of what God's doing around the world, and that's what excites me, Tom.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you want to share just for anyone listening that, like we said at the beginning, that you're getting all these emails today on different giving opportunities, or friends that maybe run organizations or reaching out? What are like 3 to 5 things? Because I know you meet with donors, and you've had donors, have you put together like giving plans for them and strategic plans for them. What are like 3 to 5 things that donors can practically be doing to? Obviously, we'll talk in a second about partnering with All Access, but just as you're getting approached, and it can be difficult, especially if it's like a friend and you're almost just doing it because they're a friend. What would be some practical things they could be thinking about to analyze opportunities?
Yeah, number one would be to define your own giving mission statement. God has put us all here to make disciples of all nations and love our neighbors around the world, but He's also put given us specific skill sets or interests or passions, whether it's human trafficking or extreme poverty internationally. What is your giving mission statement? And the reason that's so important is you want to direct your giving dollars towards that. We very much see our finances and particularly our giving as an asset on this mission to uh, redeem the world. And when you see it that way, uh, it's really, really helpful. And it makes a lot more sense than just randomly giving. I helped a guy who's given $43 million away over the last 15 years. And he had his own mission statement. But what he didn't realize was the one offs, the giving Tuesdays, and when people just randomly asked, it added up to about 30% of his giving
Wow.
portfolio, which, if you do the math, that's a lot of money that could
Yeah.
have helped a lot more people. And so, what that allows you to do is when giving opportunities arise, and they will, it gives you a framework and a foundation to be able to say, yeah, I'm going to engage with that, or hey, I'm just not the right guy for that.
Hmm.
And obviously, it becomes more and more important the more you give. So if somebody says, "Hey, I need $5 for this or that," I don't recommend you go back and look at your giving
Yeah.
portfolio and go, "Well, I don't know." But when it's 5,000 or fifty
Hmm.
thousand or 500,000, definitely advise that. So that's the starting place. And if you have that perspective of giving as an asset to be used on this mission, and you have that foundational mission statement, "Hey, this is what we want to fund and want to be a part of," it sets you up to really navigate it from there. And obviously, I think to do it well, we highly advise people to give towards something that's actively monitored, because if you give somewhere and it's not actively being monitored, you have no idea the impact that's being made. So obviously, it's really hard to do that by yourself. You
Yeah.
can look at annual reports and all that. There's a way to do it, but it's kind of why we've developed this tool. Is it just becomes increasingly harder and harder to do it well without a tool
Hmm.
to help you. So we try to make that as easy as possible. But start with your mission statement. Start with your. I recommend setting aside, hey, this is what we want to give this year or next year, because it's a lot of fun giving those
Hmm.
dollars when it's already set aside as opposed to coming out somewhere else. So those are some of my practical tips when it
Yeah.
comes
Those
to
are
giving.
those are great. And that last one, so it'd be almost like setting up like a donor advised fund,
Right.
maybe. And I know we've used for years NCF, for National Christian Foundation, which has been great, and Waterstone, and there's different ones and you can use. But I think to your point, that's been really helpful to from a planning standpoint. Um, to think about it in terms of investing at the end of the day is what you're doing. And
Mhm.
my wife and I did exactly what you're talking about. We created a mission statement probably 8, 9 years ago, and we really like that's the primary focus. There are times when we'll give to things, outside of that, but we try to keep it a small percentage of our giving because the main focus for us is being really unified in those areas that we feel like those are just causes that God's made us really passionate about. And
Yeah.
so we want to pursue those. And it's neat with 100 Times Harvest, our nonprofit, and then All Access. And that when we first got connected, I think there could have been a sense of like, well, we're kind of doing something similar. So, and a lot of times organizations choose not to work together. And it's kind of like, well, we're competing. And we didn't see it that way at all. I mean, I think from the beginning, you've always said, hey, any way that I can help or share data or resources or even share like the way that you guys are vetting organizations, you're like, I'm happy to do it. We're the same way. And we wanted to be a part of what you guys are doing at All Access because to your point, you've set it up in such a way where 100% of what you're giving to the fund goes to the field. And then you can also choose to instead give to the other side, which is just your overhead, which is important. But you've set it up in that way where the donors get to choose. Like, do they want to give and have this free resource, which is amazing? Instead of being the guy that's like staying up late trying to look through annual reports and figure this out on your own, why not use a proven tool and be able to have 100% of that go to the field? And then also, I think we've seen so much value in it that we started on that side, and then now we're supporting you guys on your overhead because we want to see you grow, get this out to more people. I think it's a huge opportunity for individuals, companies, even other nonprofits like us, and then even churches to partner with what you guys are doing. Because I think that unfortunately, and it's something we saw early on with the 100 Times Harvest, so much giving is just taking advantage of people's emotions. Tim said it earlier, we feel like there's things we are supposed to do. And so then someone can kind of latch on to that and get, it's the opportunity in front of us and it's maybe an emotional appeal. And so we give to that and we don't actually think as much about, was that a wise or smart decision? Like, did that make an impact? It's like, no, but I feel good
Mhm.
because I gave the money. And
Yeah.
so it's just reorienting that. And instead of feeling good because we gave, it's more realizing that all these resources we have are a gift from God in the first place. And so we're supposed to be stewarding them. And so we steward our resources in different ways. We give some of our resources. Our resources are there to support our families, to run our businesses. But it's like, but all of them are ultimately from God and they're all to be stewarded. And then ultimately, like you said, we'll answer for how we stewarded those resources. And we want to be able to answer that we did everything we could. We know we're not going to be perfect, but that we did everything we could in that. So talk through how someone could get involved with All Access. And obviously, Tim and I'd love to be a resource for people as well as kind of a third party that's gotten involved with you guys. But as a next step, if someone wanted to become a member, how could they do that? What would that look like? What could they expect?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Tom. And 100 Times Harvest is a sponsor of All Access that makes the fund 100% efficient. So you guys are investing and growing, and we want to be, anybody, particularly in the United States, who wants to give well, that they know this tool exists and they're invited to join. And you guys are not only making it possible, but helping a lot more people come and join the fund. So it's an investment that has it multiplies with more people. So we can't thank you guys enough for being a part of this and helping make it possible. But what's fun about the way we set this up is we invite everyone not to come give to us, but to come give with us through the fund. We're giving to it as well, and we get to give to some incredible giving opportunities around the world. And you're right, come give and make an impact, but it's really rewarding on the back end of getting those reports and seeing what's happening. And I love that framework. But yeah, you can go to allaccess.international online and you can see everything. We're an open source. You can see our entire evaluation process, organizations in our portfolio, where they're working, what the project is, and we make it really easy to sign up. And so we call them our donors members because it's a member-led fund, meaning it's up to us how much we give every year our members. And so you can go and sign up there. You can give it any amount. Obviously, the more we're able to give together, the more impact we're able to make. But a member starts at $90 a month or $1,000 a year. And so we just encourage people to join our fund and give with us to these incredible programs and see the impact that you're going to make.
And you mentioned it earlier. I know you just went through your vetting process. So what's like the opportunity out there that's already vetted that you haven't raised the capital for yet, but that you've already vetted and done the work on?
Right. Yeah. So we analyzed 1,000 organizations this year through our process. We have 8 current ones in our portfolio right now, but next week our board is going to vote on our annual updated portfolio, and our evaluation team is recommending 12 giving opportunities. So going from including the 8 in our portfolio right now. Luckily, they all, even reanalyzing them against every other giving opportunity, they are staying in the portfolio, but adding 4 new giving opportunities that I don't want to share quite yet because I want to wait for the board to approve it. But if they do approve it, these 12 high impact verified giving opportunities have $86 million of giving opportunity, where every dollar is accounted for. And those $86 million can help lift over 2 million people out of extreme spiritual and physical poverty in 14 of the most unreached and impoverished places in the world. And so that's the what's out there. We're just trying to pull and give $1 million, and we're
Yeah.
still relatively small, but that's our goal, is just to invite just our friends and our networks to join us in giving $1 million to these organizations. And what they can expect, obviously 100% goes to the field, but every quarter, every 90 days, we send out a report, and we try to make it where it's not a boring report. It's very much like a social media experience where you can scroll and see, here's a quick progress update of what's happening in the field in real time. Here are pictures from that quarter. So these aren't stock photos or from a year ago. This is within the last 90 days, a story within the last 90 days. And then you scroll down, you can see where every dollar went, so which organization. So you can give to the fund as a whole or to a specific project, and you'll see that there. And then what we also do, which is very important to us, is showing every itemized expense we make that quarter. And actually, every itemized expense we've ever made in the history of All Access is on our website. We just figured, we want to be as transparent as possible. And what's more transparent than showing every expense? And so we itemize and justify every single operational expense we make, even though none of the members' dollars are going towards that. We just thought it's important to show that. And so, yeah, that's what people can expect on the quarterly reports. And then obviously every year we do an annual report that, again, is a very fun experience to see what did we do this year. You also gain access to us. We call ourselves advisors in a way because, people do come to us and say, hey, will you advise us on our giving strategy? And we're happy to do that. So we encourage people to engage with us, take advantage of us being there to serve you and giving with you, and encourage you to get involved with the organizations as much as you want. Go see it in person, go on trips. So it's amazing. I have the best job in the world, really helping people make more impact with their life, and doing that, helping people with the greatest needs around the world. It's amazing.
Well, what you've set up is incredible, and I just want to thank you for dedicating your time to it. And you could be doing a lot of other things. And I know I was in a meeting with you not long ago, and a local head of a engineering company was like, Lane's got a job whenever he wants to come back and do engineering. So I know that you can do that. You could be doing a lot of other things, but this is important to you. And just the transparency and the way you've set it up, that's been impressive to me from day one. When I first got introduced, went to your website. So I encourage everyone to go to your website. You said it was allaccess.international, right?
Right.
Go to the website because you've done such a good job of like videos explaining how it works, the process. It's very well documented and then very transparent as far as like where all the money's going. And I think, like you said earlier, we're all very skeptical because we've heard stories. And then it's happened to us, personally. We're kind of getting taken advantage of. Like, you're working hard, you want to have a positive impact. You give money, and then you find out that it didn't go to what and that's such a shame. And then that does have negative ripple effects down the road. And so, I really appreciate how transparent you guys are and how you are trying to do things that probably shouldn't even really be expected, but you're just going above and beyond to do them. And so I definitely encourage our audience to check out your website and connect with you. always enjoyed all of our interactions together and learned a lot. And it's always really interesting to me to hear what's going on a little bit more globally with these different areas and what the challenges are. And it's pretty eye opening because when you live in a place like Dallas or Houston or Austin, where it's like everything's developing out and new and turning over, and there's, home values are constantly increasing, and it's easy to kind of get caught in these bubbles of our lives here and forgetting that for most of the world, it's a really, really difficult existence. I mean, we're talking about survival is what a heavy percentage of the world is focused on. So thanks again for joining the podcast and coming on. It's great to do this, and hopefully it's beneficial for our audience today with just this being kind of the topic of the day, and also heading into Christmas and just kind of this season that is generally considered kind of the giving season. There's a lot of opportunity to give effectively. So that's hopefully what our audience can take away from today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Love what you guys are doing here at DMRE and 100 Times Harvest. It's incredible. I mean, you don't have to do this. I mean, you already broker great deals for folks, but you guys have a great heart, and you're right. I mean, everybody that's listening to this, or anybody anywhere, really, they want to make more impact with their life, and they probably give, and hopefully they give. And everybody, we're trying to help people make an incredible impact for their life and give well. And so, hopefully we are helping people who are listening to this, who are involved in your industry, who are wrestling with those two things, and you guys are helping them do that. So thank you guys for what you're doing.
Thanks, Lane. I'll say once more, check out Lane's website, allaccess.international, and thanks for listening to the show today.
Thank you for listening to our podcast today. If you have questions about land you own in Texas, send us an email at texaslandguys@dmre.com and follow us on LinkedIn to stay updated.